What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and today the Giants dropped their first unofficial depth chart of the regular season ahead of their Week 1 matchup with the Washington Commanders. I'm really excited for this game. I can't wait. Hopefully the Giants kick off their bang with an upset win, but in today's episode provided by Sleeper, we're going to go ahead and dive into the depth chart. Should Jaxson Dart be the QB2 as he was listed on this depth chart? We're also going to look at some other things that caught our eye, like the CB2 position being listed as Cordell Flott or Deonte Banks. Pretty interesting development there. So we're going to go ahead and give you guys our takeaways to this depth chart and kind of have an extended conversation about Jaxson Dart, how ready he seems to be to start in the regular season, and how soon we think that could happen. Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? How are you feeling entering Week 1? And what was your biggest takeaway from the Giants' first unofficial depth chart?
Doing pretty good, man. Sunday is coming pretty fast. Had my last fantasy football draft last night, so you know Week 1 is just around the bend. We got Thursday Night Football in 2 days. Pretty exciting stuff. We're really gearing up for an exciting regular season. It's going to be a long one, but hopefully a much more enjoyable one for the Giants. Unofficial depth chart is just that. It's unofficial, but there's some interesting notes, as you mentioned, Jaxson Dart, and that weird cornerback position I discussed yesterday with Deonte Banks and Cordell Flott. We've kind of been talking about that over the last couple days. The consensus thought is that Flott will be the starter, but I think we both agree the position battle is probably going to flow into the regular season. Definitely some interesting points we want to touch on this unofficial depth chart, which, you know, maybe hints at something at what the regular season roster is going to be and what the starters and depth pieces are going to look like, but definitely excited to get into it.
No doubt. I'm excited to get into this season. I can't wait. Jaden Daniels in Week 1, that's a tough matchup. But I saw Drew Phillips saying today to the media, that's what we want. We want tough matchups. We want to go up against the best of the best and prove that we are the best. That's essentially what he said, just paraphrasing there. But I love that sentiment, and I love that mentality, and I love that the Giants are kicking it off against a divisional opponent to start the regular season. And not only a divisional opponent, but a quarterback who really could be in the MVP conversation, which is where I hope Jaxson Dart ends up one day in his career. Let's start there, Alex, and talk about Dart as the QB2. So going into the preseason, there was a little bit of a question mark because on the first unofficial depth chart entering preseason Week 1, the quarterbacks were listed as Russell Wilson QB1, Jameis Winston QB2, Jaxson Dart QB3, and then, of course, Tommy DeVito is QB4. However, despite Jaxson Dart being listed as the third-string quarterback, he was the second quarterback into the lineup during all 3 of those preseason games. Well, in fact, he was the first one on the field in the final preseason game as he made his first start. But Jameis Winston played as the third string throughout the preseason, so seeing Jaxson Dart listed as QB2 on this depth chart does not come as a complete surprise to me. This seems expected. And like you said, Alex, these are unofficial depth charts. Brian Daboll can list the depth chart one way on a Tuesday, and then on Sunday change his mind and move somebody in his head and says, hey, you know what? Instead of putting you out there, I want you to go on the field. It's always fluid and there's nothing concrete about it. But there is an expectation when a quarterback is listed as the second string that if something happens to Russell Wilson here, Jaxson Dart would be the guy going into the lineup for the Giants. Do you think that should be the case, Alex? Because I got to say, yeah, I do. I think Jaxson Dart showed a lot in the preseason. I think he was impressive. He flashed swagger, confidence, poise, everything that you want to see from a rookie quarterback, and honestly, everything that you want to see from some veteran quarterbacks who don't possess a lot of those traits. He did look ready to go. Now, I don't want him starting in Week 1. I don't even necessarily want him starting in Week 5. But if something happens to Russell Wilson, I already know what Jameis Winston is. He's a good backup quarterback who's going to throw a lot of touchdowns and interceptions. But I don't yet know what Jaxson Dart is or what he could be, and that's the guy that I would want to take over because I do feel like he's probably ready for the task. So, Alex, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Jaxson Dart, if Russell Wilson goes down, is that who you want stepping into the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I guess the better question is, let's identify what this season is. It's a bridge season, and when it comes to having things to gain, what do you have to gain from Jameis Winston playing football for the Giants if Russell Wilson goes down or, he underperforms? What do you have to gain, right? You're probably not a playoff team. You're using your backup quarterback. What you have to gain is very little, but if you start Jaxson Dart, you have the world to gain. There is no supplement for live action. There is no replacement for the experience that you get from playing against starting NFL players, right? That it will give Jaxson Dart more to work with than him sitting behind the scenes week 5, week 6, week 7, week 8. So if the opportunity comes and the Giants are ready to make that change for whatever reason, they need to go to Jaxson Dart. There's only so much he can learn sitting behind Russell Wilson, sitting, alongside Jameis Winston and just gathering intel, right? I do think the first couple of weeks of the season is important for him to learn, the preparation, the mentality, what it feels, what it looks like, sit on the bench, familiarize himself with what an NFL regular season game feels and looks like from that perspective. I think that's a good thing for him to learn. But after the first couple of weeks, there is not much else to learn. You know what I mean? He has to go and do it. And there is no supplement for that. So, if the Giants feel like it's ready to turn the page because of underperformance from Russell Wilson or an injury occurs, Jaxson Dart needs to be the guy that they go to. It's just going to be so beneficial for him to have the film to work with. But also, if he builds confidence and he looks good, he will never look back. That job will be his for hopefully as long as we can possibly, ride his performance into the sunset.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to put it. We don't ever have to look back if Jaxson Dart steps in and makes an immediate impact, right? Washington is never looking back on time with Sam Howell, right? That's forgotten about at this point. They're moving ahead with their franchise quarterback, and I'm just hoping that the Giants find theirs and move ahead with Jaxson Dart. Now, I think there is an interesting conversation, though, Alex, that's starting to buzz on social media. It's related to Jaxson Dart being listed as the QB2, but it's also related to just a lot of the reports that we're hearing about Brian Daboll being in love with Jaxson Dart. And I say that literally because Connor Hughes of SNY reported today that following the Giants preseason game with the New York Jets, Jaxson Dart was in the locker room and Brian Daboll just walked up to him, looked him in the eyes and said, "I love you," and then walked away. That's what Connor Hughes is reporting. I don't know what to make of that necessarily, but Connor Hughes is spinning it into the Giants believe he's ready to start and they're going to try and get him on the field as soon as possible. That's what Connor Hughes was reporting. He said that week 4, week 5, you could realistically see Jaxson Dart in the lineup that early this season for the Giants. And I want to get your take on that, Alex, because I don't necessarily know where I stand on this. I don't know anymore how soon I want Jaxson Dart in the lineup. I'll say this, though. There was a lot of conversation when Jaxson Dart was drafted about he's going to sit the entirety of this year. It's going to be a redshirt year. He'll go into 2026 as a starter. Day by day, that seems less and less likely to me, especially after watching the way he performed in the preseason and the energy that he's brought to this team. But to his credit, Russell Wilson's brought a lot of leadership and energy as well. So I think it's becoming a tricky week-to-week conversation now. It's really hard to make a prediction or make any discerning decision one way or another. But I do want to hear your thoughts on it now that it's starting to become a louder conversation. When will Jaxson Dart get into the starting lineup, in your opinion?
It's a great question. My projection right now is that the Giants have a pretty tough schedule. I think that's pretty obvious, but they have a much more talented roster, and teams are bound to regress to some degree. The Cowboys don't look like they're going to be that good. I mean, at least on defense. Offense, I'm sure they'll be great just because of the talent. But then you look at the Commanders, like Jaden Daniels should regress from that season. Their defense is old. Some of their guys are just the veterans, like – they overperformed. I don't know. Like, we'll see how things go for some of these teams. But, my general idea for Jaxson Dart is I think he'll be in the starting lineup by week 6. That's my initial projection right now. And let's say, let's exclude injuries from this. I think that the offense that Brian Daboll wants to run and the pace he wants to do it at fits the mold for Jaxson Dart quite well. And I think that Mike Kafka actually really likes Jaxson Dart. And we saw the way that he was calling plays in the preseason. Jaxson Dart looked fantastic. He went 372 yards on a 68.1% completion rate with 3 touchdowns, and that includes 3 drops. Some of them deep passes. Bo Collins had a drop or 2, and obviously Jalen Hyatt had a drop or 2. So you're looking at a player who should have had more like 500 yards and maybe 4+ touchdowns, but those drops really hurt him. So I do think that he is ready. I think the team feels he's ready. Daboll telling him, "I love you." I think Daboll's a master Jedi with this stuff. I think he knows. I think he's in his head. I think that he is making this connection with Jaxson Dart, where Dart can look to Daboll and know that he fully trusts him. You know what I mean? Like they have a fully mutually beneficial, trustworthy relationship. I don't necessarily know how that goes when it comes to performance, but I do know one thing. To be a good NFL quarterback, you have to lean into your coaching and you have to trust that your coaching is doing everything in the best interest of the player, right? The Giants have taken all the strengths from Ole Miss and they've applied it to their offense so that Jaxson Dart can walk into the NFL and see familiarity across the board. Then they add the other elements to that equation. They've done everything, in my opinion, at least, I don't know about you, but to familiarize the playbook with him and also apply it to the NFL. So, we're going to see how that looks when he gets in there. But right now, I think mentally you can tell the aura, you use the word aura, the confidence, he's bleeding confidence, oozing confidence. And he's just soaking up all of this energy, soaking up all this attention and hype, and he's channeling it into confidence and performance, right? That, I think, is what being in New York is all about. There's going to be all eyes on you. Every camera is going to be on you. If you can take that and use it, you can be a superstar here. But if you can't take that and you're going to let it get the best of you, we've seen it destroy many players over the years. So I think Jaxson Dart has the ability to use that to his advantage and use that to make him better. And it's special. It's the exact opposite of Eli Manning, actually. It's like in terms of just like he like kind of leans into it, and Eli always kind of shied away from it. But they both, hopefully are equally as successful long term.
I hope Jaxson Dart is even more successful than Eli Manning long term, although that's going to be obviously a difficult mountain to climb, but hey, that's what this is all about, hoping that your next quarterback is your best quarterback and really appreciating the one that you have when you have him, because man, after Eli Manning left, I learned to appreciate him even more than I already did, and that's saying a lot because I've got every Eli Manning memorabilia and jersey you could ever think of, so loved Eli, but I'm really excited for Jaxson Dart, Alex, and I agree with a lot of the things you said. I think Dable is head over heels for the kid. I think he's really confident in him, and I think that when the going gets tough this season, that conversation is going to get really loud, and I think Brian Dable, deep down in his heart of hearts, he probably feels like Jaxson Dart will give this team the best chance to win games in the second half of the season. And I clarify second half of the season because I do think there's an adjustment period to go through the preparations for a Sunday game day. And I think he'll probably get some reps here or there. And I honestly think that the Giants are going to win a couple games early this season that are going to extend Russell Wilson's time in the starting lineup. But eventually, even if the Giants are a middle-of-the-road team, Alex, let's say that they're 5-5 after 10 weeks. You put Jaxson Dart in the lineup at that point because you don't know for sure if you're making the playoffs or not, but you know what you are at that moment with Russell Wilson being a middle-of-the-road team. The only way that you could possibly be not a middle-of-the-road team and be better than that would, of course, be to make a quarterback change. Even if Russell Wilson is playing fine, it's the same situation that happened back in 2004 when Eli Manning was drafted and Kurt Warner had that team hovering around 500. He was playing decent football, but still, they knew, hey, if we push this rookie in, also, we get film for next year, but if he ends up playing really great football, we'll elevate our ceiling. We've seen that time and time again with many different quarterbacks, and that's why sometimes the plan is to sit them for a whole year, but that plan does not always play out the way you expect, and sometimes these rookies are ready, and when they're ready, you gotta let them play because the ceiling just exponentially increases on the possible wins of your football team overnight when you put that rookie in the lineup, especially if they are a tremendous rookie like we think Jaxson Dart honestly could be based on what we saw this preseason. And the last thing I'll say on that before I transition, when you look at quarterbacks in the preseason, and when you look at players in the preseason generally speaking, fans will try and write off certain performances by saying they're going up against backups. They're going up against the second and the third team and the fourth team. It's not that impressive. But it is impressive when they are beating up those backups. Because when they're beating up those backups, that means that they can probably be competitive with the starters. That's the whole idea here. And so Jaxson Dart beating up on backups in the preseason doesn't mean that he's going to beat up on starters. It just means that he can hold his own against the starters, at least. And possibly also beat up on them. But he shouldn't be a ghost. He shouldn't be seeing ghosts like Sam Darnold was years ago. He should at least be competitive, and that's the main takeaway from the preseason.
Absolutely. And, I'll ask you this. What do good teams do to bad teams? They beat up on them, or they're supposed to, right? So, that's kind of the same concept I would use for Jaxson Dart. Good player beating up on bad opponents. And, obviously we'll see how he fares against better opponents, but that's what differentiates good from great. Great teams beat good opponents. Good teams beat bad opponents and sometimes are not that competitive or maybe 50-50 with other good opponents. Like that, those are the teams that don't win championships and the great teams do. So Jaxson Dart, we have seen him beat up on bad opponents. We know that he can go in there and he'll beat up on maybe some bad defense like the Saints, let's say, or whoever it might be. But now we got to see him. Like, the only way to see if he can really hang is if we go see him ball out against Denver or ball out against Baltimore. Like, that's what I need to see. That's what we need to see. But I think the Giants understand that. So, like, when he does get his name called, when his number gets called and he's ready to go, it's not going to be. And I'll ask you this, Anthony. Do you subscribe to the idea of a player, like, let's say they can pick and choose when he's going to start? Do you think that they'll put him in against a weaker opponent to build his confidence? And do you think, like, they'll put him right in against a tough opponent and just, like, see if he can, survive? Or do you think building his confidence is a good idea?
I think that building his confidence is a good idea. I think confidence is everything for quarterbacks, but I think when he gets inserted to the lineup is going to be more dependent on the success of the team at the time, and it's going to be more dependent on the success of Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson looks mid, quote unquote, if he looks bad, especially, they'll start to have that conversation and make that transition. And if the team is maybe starting to turn on Russell Wilson, maybe the locker room is like, why isn't the rookie in? He's so much better. Then they'll make the switch no matter who they're playing on Sunday. But in an ideal world, if they're just making the transition based on when the quarterback is ready, you don't want to throw him in on a prime time road matchup against the Eagles, right? That's not ideal. You'd rather wait for the next week. Even if it's still a tough opponent, maybe you don't want to just baptize them by the fire, I think. So I think there is a lot to building confidence. I think, honestly, you look around the league and some of these quarterbacks who were thrown into the fire, whether that be Bryce Young or Caleb Williams, some of them have managed to float. Some of them have shied away. Some of them have flamed out, right? I mean, a lot of quarterbacks have been number one picks that didn't pan out, or maybe they pan out elsewhere once that confidence builds up and once those expectations are lowered. Sam Darnold being a great example of that, having to go to a new environment to find his success. He went to several environments before he found the home, and now he's in a new one. So it's a little funny with quarterbacks. It's always about constantly developing and growing and building that confidence. So I would say putting him in against a weaker opponent would be ideal. Just the one caveat and problem here is the Giants don't have many weak opponents on their schedule. They got a really tough schedule this season, so there's not really going to be a perfect time, and it's just going to come down to, hey, is Jaxson Dart ready to go? Then let's let him go. And the last thing that I'll say, I think when Jaxson Dart is in the lineup, though, no training wheels. Let him run the offense and let him turn it loose. I don't want to see that. So we're talking about building confidence. The number one way you're going to build his confidence is if he does have success and he has his failures, knowing that there wasn't a parachute on his back. Just let him go out there and do his thing. So I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a fun time tracking Jaxson Dart this season. But again, looking at this week one depth chart, Alex, let's transition over here to the defensive side of ball and talk about these cornerbacks. But first, a quick message from our sponsor.
All right, guys, 1 second to talk about the Fireside Giants sponsor for the whole 2025 NFL season, the Sleeper Daily Fantasy Sports app. Sports are more fun when you're in it together, and that's exactly what Sleeper delivers with real-time scores, blazing fast news, and in-app chat. You can celebrate plays as they happen. And here's the kicker. Sleeper's Daily Fantasy lets you turn game day into payday. Pick more or less on your favorite player stats, touchdowns, passing yards, fantasy points, and more. And you can win up to 100 times your money. That's freaking awesome. I'm trying to cash in this year, and I want to do it with you guys. Entries take less than 30 seconds. Withdrawals are fast and secure, and you can even miss a pick and still cash in with a combo play. So what are you waiting for? Download the #1 sports app today and use promo code FIRESIDE for a 100% deposit match up to $100. Terms apply. Sleeper, the best way to experience sports together. And for this week's picks, I know you want to hear them. Giants Commanders. I got Malik Neighbors over 74.5 receiving yards. Russell Wilson over 217.5 passing yards. Cam Scottaboo, I don't even think he gets that many opportunities, let alone scores a touchdown. Under 0.5 touchdown. I think Tyron Tracy might be the guy you want to bet on there. Darius Slayton over 23.5 receiving yards, 1 deep pass. And we know Russell Wilson, I think he completed 54% of his deep passes last year. That's the guy I'm looking at, Darius Slayton, who has not gotten that much attention this summer. I think he comes up big with at least 1 big reception. And then Krosky Merritt, the running back for the Commanders, rookie. I don't think he gets much playing time, even though everybody's talking about him. I think it's all hype for now. He still has a long way to go before he carves out a really big role. Less than 34.5 yards. Those are my picks for week 1. Let's lock in and let's ride.
So, Alex, CB2 listed as Cordell Flott or Deonte Banks. Honestly, if I have to give you who I thought won the position battle based on their performance in the summer and in the preseason, and even in the spring at OTAs, Cordell Flott should be listed as the CB2 in my mind. I think Deonte Banks has more potential. I would love to see him pan out. I know he was drafted higher, But if you're going based on who had the better summer, it's hard not to make that argument for Cordell Flott. But I do understand why they're listing both of them. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that Cordell Flott should have won the job, or are you kind of happy with it being still up for grabs entering the regular season?
I mean, listen, if the Giants want to trot out the team that is going to give them the best chance to win, Cordell Flott will be on the field because he looked the best. He has more experience. He turned his head better. Like, he just had a better summer. And to be honest with you, I think that's worth noting and worth acting on. So if you're the Giants and you want to trot out a team that is going to be competitive, that is going to be hopefully winning football games, you need to have your best 11 on both sides of the football out there. And Cordell Flott is the best pick right now. Now, I will say this. Here's the question. If this is a contract year for Flott, if he has a good season, do you extend him? Deonte Banks, obviously now you're facing a situation where like he kind of is a backup and he's a first round pick from 2 years ago, but he's under contract for at least the next year for his fourth season. In 2026, they could pick up his fifth year option. So that will be a decision they have to make down the road. But I will say this, based on Cordell Flott's past, I think that if he has a good year, I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants extended him on a pretty reasonable contract. It's not out of the realm of possibility. And then you just have some good depth and, maybe Banks steps up, gets better and like takes the job one day. Who knows? Anything could happen. But I do think the Giants need to be thinking about winning, being competitive, and Flott will give them the best chance to do that. However, if he struggles, if he gets burned, if he has a bad performance, Deonte Banks should be right in there. You know what I mean? Like that. This should be. I don't think that Flott was good enough and showed enough to be like, you are the bona fide starter. If you have a bad performance, like you're still going to be the guy. I personally think that if he has a bad performance, like this could be a ride the hot hand situation. Just see who rises to the occasion. That's kind of personally how I look at it. I think that he won it, but I don't think he won it so blatantly that it's like, this is my starter for the full season.
I agree with you. I think that it's a short leash no matter who is starting in week one. I think both of them honestly should be looked at as rotational starters at this point. I know obviously you ideally want two cornerbacks starting the entire game, but it's not an ideal world. The Giants definitely do not have the ideal roster, so they're going to have to do things in somewhat unorthodox fashion at times. And maybe that is having two guys starting in one position, just rotating them in and out of the lineup. And I think one way to do it, Alex, is based on matchups. Let's think about if the Giants are going up against a team here that maybe has a good wide receiver too, but this guy isn't so good at contested catches. Well, who matches up well with that? That would be Deonte Banks, because Deonte Banks has tight coverage. He just doesn't make the play in contested catch situations. Now, if it's the other way around, this guy is really good at contested catches. Well, in order to mitigate that, you might play Cordell Flott a little bit more because he can play the ball and be a little bit more physical in some of those situations. So I think that's one way to look at it. You could play this as a matchup-based opponent, right? You could just go with the hot hands, like you said, Alex, or based on who you're facing, game plan against that specific WR2, and that's what determines which cornerback is going to be taking the field on that specific game week. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, rotating them in based on the matchups that the Giants might face this year.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. That's a good question. I think that faster receivers, Banks does probably match up better with because of his athletic profile. But guys that are a bit more route savvy, a little bit smarter, maybe more experienced, I think Cordell Flott may, like, for example, like I'd probably want Cordell Flott against like a Stephon Diggs, and I'd probably want Deonte Banks. I mean, no one's going to really cover this guy with his speed, but like probably want him against like a Tyreek Hill. Like that's just like from a physical matchup perspective, that's probably what I'd be thinking. Or take it one step further, I'd probably want Deonte Banks up against, like, I'm trying to think of like a Terry McLaurin would be a good example, and like Cordell Flott would probably be better up against maybe like a Cortland Sutton, like a little. I don't know. I'm just trying to like think of like physical matchups, but
yeah, with Terry McLaurin, he's really good on those contested catches, evidenced by those touchdowns that he's scored.
He's so fast. He's a track star. Like that's what I'm thinking. Like he gets downfield, and I need that makeup speed, and Banks has that makeup speed. I think. Like just on like traits alone, I'd like that matchup better. But again, turning his head, like, because that's also the problem with Deonte Banks. Like he can catch up, but he won't turn his freaking head. So like he catches up, but the guy's still gonna jump over him and moss the shit out of him because he's not getting his head turned around.
Yeah. The issue that I have with Deonte Banks, let's compare him to Cordell Flott. Deonte Banks is more athletically gifted. Deonte Banks plays tighter coverage. Deonte Banks is better in run support. Deonte Banks cannot turn his head around. He beats him in every category except for this one fatal flaw, but this one fatal flaw is really damning. He really cannot sustain a CB2 role if he doesn't fix this. So it's unfortunate because all of the flashes of potential have been there for Deonte Banks. He has the speed. He has the athleticism. He is physical against the run. He is really tight in his man coverage abilities, and he also is good in zone coverage. Like, he really is the complete package minus this one critical detail. So if he can just get that down, I still stand by my belief that Deonte Banks could be a top cornerback in this game if he could just figure out how to improve those ball skills. But until he does, it's hard to rely on him for a full game. It's hard to say, hey, go match up with George Pickens opposite CeeDee Lamb. I mean, how is that matchup going to fare? George Pickens makes some of the most ridiculous contested catches that you will ever see in your life. So in that game, are you going to roll with Cordell Flat? But at the same time, Cordell Flat's not as good in coverage. He's not as good against the run, so you leave yourself vulnerable in different ways. That's the tough thing that the Giants have to balance here, and hopefully Shane Bowen can logically figure out a way to do it, because it is a little bit tough to jump through these hurdles and figure out which cornerback should be on the field for which down and distance and against which opponent. It really is a little bit of a conundrum for Shane Bowen to go through. But Alex, do you think that Shane Bowen can find the way to make it work? How do you think this balance is going to shape out, and what's your confidence in our defensive coordinator to get this job done?
My confidence in Shane Bowen is questionable at best right now. I think last year's entire defense was horrible, like just horrible. I need to see it to believe it at this point. The Giants' pass rush is Shane Bowen proof. You know, all you have to do is rush 4, and they're probably going to win their battles. Like Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Dexter Lawrence, and Kayvon. Like you just have so much talent there. Like he can't possibly mess that up. If he does, he should be fired on the freaking spot. But the secondary is going to be the bigger question, right? You have Paulson Adebo coming off this fractured fibula. You have obviously Newman moving into the strong safety role. Javon Holland playing free safety, and he's coming off a down season with Miami. And then, like you said, you have Banks and Flat. How do you split those reps up? How do you kind of balance that sheet? Well, you know, I think they're just going to give Flott the keys to the position until he gives them back. You know, that's kind of how this is going to go. I think he gets the start, and if they decide on that. But at the same time, you know, the reason I think that they haven't chosen who's going to be the starter yet is because I do think they believe I mean, I guess here's the question, though, because Paulson Adebo is going to match up with Terry McLaurin, right? Like, that's their WR1. He'll be taking on Terry McLaurin. Is Noah Brown considered their WR2? Would that conceivably be who Flott or Banks goes up against?
Well, I guess it depends on your definition of a WR2, because I think Deebo Samuel is going to play primarily out of the slot, right? So, but he would be their WR2.
I would prefer Cordell Flott. So here's the thing. Neither of them are tackling Deebo Samuel if he actually catches the ball. So you have to stop him from catching the ball. That's kind of the question. I'd rather Cordell Flott in coverage, but I'd rather Banks as a tackler. So like it's tough to choose.
To be fair though, for Deebo for Deebo specifically, this is
Drew Phillips actually
double cheeseburger Deebo at this point. So this might be not as difficult of a matchup as we're maybe considering. So I don't know.
I do like Drew Phillips against him a lot though. Personally, I think he'll lock out Deebo.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, Drew is so good against the run. Drew is good in coverage. Yeah. Drew is physical. He's fast. I mean, and now that he got LASIK eye surgery, hopefully he can see when the ball is coming his way.
That would be nice. I do like him. I mean, look, Deebo is primarily a slot guy. I think they'll have Drew Phillips probably lined up against him most of the game, and I think that we're going to see a lot of Deebo not getting the football. They're probably going to be feeding Zach Ertz a lot because probably Terry McLaurin too. He'll get reps, of course, and some deep shots. But Newman, finally we have a free safety in Holland who can catch up and actually make those plays downfield. So I'm pretty excited about that reality. But so who is their WR2 then? Let's like you said, not WR2, but who's their other outside receiver? Is it Noah Brown in this instance?
I guess it would be, yeah.
Okay, so if that's the case, I think I would prefer Cordell Flott against Noah Brown because I do think Brown's actually a decent receiver, but he's not like a blazer by any means. So I do think that having Flott's skill set may be a better fit.
Yeah, Noah Brown is, though, questionable for this week, which is pretty interesting. And if he's not going to play, the other guy opposite Terry McLaurin would probably be Luke McCaffrey.
Who's a bit smaller. He's a lot smaller. He's also kind of a slot guy, though, right? He comes out of the backfield, too. Like, he's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, they have him listed on the outside, but he'll move around.
Yeah. Interesting. I
They
mean,
don't have a
against
lot
a
of
guy
depth
like
at receiver.
McCaffrey,
Just looking at this, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
yeah,
they're only holding 5 receivers on their roster, which is
that's
definitely
crazy.
interesting.
That is very
Holding
interesting.
4 running backs, though.
They could have benefited from a guy like Amari Cooper, who just signed with the Raiders. But I don't know, like if you're looking at a situation where, I mean, I guess look, if it's Luke McCaffrey, let's say Noah Brown misses this game, I think I'd rather have Banks against Luke McCaffrey because Luke McCaffrey is very agile, very quick, and I think that Banks' athleticism does match up better with him. So maybe that's because he runs a lot of shorter concepts. Like that's kind of where he makes a living. So I think Banks as a better tackler and more athletic, more agile, probably is a better fit there. That might be why they're kind of hesitating because they don't know if Brown. I guess if Brown plays, Flott would be the starter, and if Brown doesn't play, then Banks would be the starter against Luke McCaffrey. Maybe that's why they haven't really labeled who the starter is there alongside of Debo.
Yeah, I think it's really going to depend. I mean, it's definitely an interesting conundrum, especially when you're looking at this Week 1 matchup with Washington. Who should be out there as that CB2? That's going to be a fun one to track as we do get into this game. And, we might get a little bit more clarity on this in the coming days because, hey, we didn't even mention Deonte Banks missed the final preseason game. Was he resting as a starter or was he resting because he was banged up? And how banged up might he have been? So we'll find out tomorrow. We get the official injury report, and we'll obviously begin previewing the game in more detail once we get some of those news and tidbits and details for you guys here on Fireside Giants. But another position, Alex, before we do wrap this up, that I want to talk about, particularly want to get your take on it because you kind of signaled it out to me before we went live. Defensive tackle, they're listing Rakeem Nunez-Roches in front of Roy Robertson-Harris. Funny enough that the Giants have 2 guys competing for this position that have 3 names. It's kind of coincidental. But I thought that Roy Robertson-Harris looked pretty good this summer, against the run especially. And Nacho, we already know what Nacho is. We saw him last year, and he's not all that stellar to begin with. So I thought that Roy Robertson-Harris had a good chance of being listed as the first defensive tackle up. Again, it is an unofficial depth chart. But when you're looking at the Washington Commanders, their ability to run the football, especially with Bill, that new running back that they got out of the 7th round, he looks dangerous. That rushing attack is lethal, and the Giants need to be prepared for it. Knowing that, who do you think should be that starting interior defender next to Dexter Lawrence?
I mean, I think it should be Roy Robertson-Harris. He looked good all summer. We've already seen Rakeem last year, and he was not good. Very, very bad in run defense. And listen, like we're talking right now, if the Commanders are short on receivers and you just bracket Terry McLaurin, there's not going to be that many places for Jaden Daniels to go. You know what I mean? If Noah Brown doesn't play, like he's going to have to feed Luke McCaffrey. He's going to have to feed, Zach Ertz, who's definitely aged at this point. Like it's going to be a lot of running the football, a lot of him improvising. So, and Anthony dropped a great breakdown about Abdul Carter and spying on Jaden Daniels, which is going to be pretty exciting to see. Because, listen, I know you have to take a guy out of coverage or take a guy from the defensive line to do that. But Abdul Carter is like shot out of a rocket. Once he identifies his target, this dude instantly engages. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's like Tom Cruise in freaking in Top Gun. Like this guy, once he locks in and locks on, you can't stop him. Like he's going to get to his target. Jaden Daniels will have to make the throw early, hopefully make some mistakes, and maybe turn the ball over. But like this is a situation where I do think that the run game is going to be pretty important, and I think Roy Robertson-Harris is a better defender against the run. So I do think that he is going to get the start there, and Rakeem will be the first guy off the bench if there was any need for a rotational piece there.
Yeah. I think I'll wrap this on a positive note here, looking at the defensive line, and say this about it. The extra interior defender that we're discussing, obviously we all know Dexter Lawrence is going to be on the field, and that's where I'm going with this. This other guy obviously makes a big impact. It's crucial to have another good interior defender out there. But one thing that we talked about all summer long was that the Giants' run defense was unimpressive. Let's describe it that way. Whether we're talking about during team drills at training camp, whether we're talking about the joint practices with the Jets, or any of those 3 preseason games, the Giants' run defense definitely looked to be the weakest part of that unit. But that was always without Dexter Lawrence, is the point that I'm making here. This defensive line is completely different when he is on or off the field. If we think that Roy Robertson-Harris looked one way when Dexter Lawrence wasn't on the field, he's going to look even better when Dexter Lawrence is on the field because he's going to have more one-on-one opportunities against the run. Dexter Lawrence needs to be double-teamed, at times triple teamed when you are running the football against the New York Giants. And then you have Abdul Carter. I don't know if you saw, Alex, but he had an elite run defense play against the Patriots in that final preseason game. And Roy Robertson-Harris being able to hold his own against the run. So I think all of these different moving pieces click into place once Dexter Lawrence is inserted at that nose tackle position. So I can't wait for that. It's going to be super exciting to see that unfold. This defensive line can be truly special. We saw Abdul Carter flash that potential. We saw Brian Burns even flash that potential. We saw all of these guys on the pass rushing unit look really good without Dexter Lawrence on the field. And now put him on the field. Now watch this quartet of pass rushers get to work. Good luck, Jaden Daniels. Good luck, Washington Commanders. This is going to be a really exciting matchup in Week 1, and I truly do believe that the Giants are one of the teams best positioned to upset their opponent in Week 1 of the NFL regular season. So it's going to be a fun one, guys. We've got a lot of great coverage coming up over the next few days leading into this preseason game. And as a reminder, I will be streaming from New Jersey, Keensburg Beach, Bayzara Music Festival. It's a really fun festival. They got great music, great times, get to hang out with me and also get to watch the game with me. And also, I'll be doing those 45-minute live streams from the Bayzara Music Festival and hanging out with you guys before and afterwards with all that great music going on. So make sure to go check that out, Bayzara Music Festival, and grab some tickets there. And also, thank you to Sleeper for sponsoring this episode. But guys, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go New York Giants.